we need to think about this really practically. If we're talking about saving money, it's actually almost an invest-to-save argument. The cost of domestic violence per year, according to the Home Office's own figures, is 5.7 billion a year, and that's the basic cost of public services. It's actually 23 billion a year if you include the cost of emotional trauma. So, and in fact, we're actually talking about relatively small numbers of women. Again, the Home Office's own figures have only really showed that it's about 600 to 800 women. Now, of course, it may be more when you provide services, but at the moment, it's about 600 women or so. And the really ridiculous thing is that when a refuge takes in a woman who doesn't have a problem with no recourse, they normally manage to take her in, give her some support, give her some counselling, get her over the worst of it, and they have her out again, totally self-sufficient, standing on her own 2 feet, often within 3 to 6 months. Whereas if you have a woman with no recourse coming into a refuge, she's likely to be there for a year or even 2 years. And it costs a refuge around £900 a month to look after a woman. So obviously it makes sense to have them in and out within 3 months rather than there for a year or 2 years. So actually, it's probably an invest-to-save argument. Also, it's really important to know it has a bigger issue for the services around it. The health services, the police services. We've spoken to health services who will say, if I'm dealing with a no-recourse woman, it's likely to take anything like 2 members of my staff, full-time, 4 or 5 days. Whereas if we're dealing with a woman who has got a straightforward case, I can have it solved in 3 or 4 hours. We had one woman who was actually in a hospital bed for 3 days, not because her injuries were that bad, her injuries actually weren't bad, but because the refuge had nowhere else to take her to. So she occupied a hospital bed for 3 days, whilst 2 staff were trying to find her a place. You can save an awful lot of money by just solving this up front. And anyway, it's not about cost, it's actually about we have an obligation under the UN Convention on Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, whereby every woman in the jurisdiction should have equal access to safety and justice when fleeing violence. It's not a choice, we're not asking for charity, actually. We're actually falling short of our obligations.
Well, I'm convinced.